She was never born brave. She always believed courage belonged to others, while she was made only of quiet fears and silent doubts. Yet life kept pushing her forward like a river that refuses to stop even when the stones try to break its flow, and she kept moving with it, unsure of who she was and terrified of who she might one day have to become. Her childhood felt small and heavy, and every day carried a quiet ache that she learned to hide inside her chest. She grew in a house where love once felt warm, but slowly turned into echoes of what used to be, and when her father walked away, without warning, the world she knew collapsed into pieces that cut deeper than any wound could ever show. She watched her mother sit in the kitchen pretending to be strong while her eyes carried oceans of sorrow, and she learned that sometimes strength is just the ability to stand when your heart is falling apart inside you. She was still so young, yet life demanded from her what it usually asks from grown souls. She worked when she wanted to rest. She smiled when her spirit was tired. She pretended to be fine so no one would worry, and every night she laid in bed whispering to herself that she would survive another day even if she did not know how survival would look tomorrow, and that silent promise became the first small spark of bravery within her, even if she never called it that. People looked at her and said she was strong, but they never saw the trembling hands, the exhausted heart, the fear that wrapped around her every thought. They only saw the surface, the part of her that refused to break in front of the world, and maybe that was where real courage lived. Not in shining moments of glory, but in the quiet choice to keep going when everything inside you begs to give up. Years passed, and the weight of life never truly softened, but her spirit slowly learned to breathe beneath it. She was still afraid, but fear stopped defining her actions. She was still wounded, but pain no longer decided her future. She began to understand something powerful. That bravery is not a gift given to a few chosen souls. Bravery grows from heartbreak, from disappointment, from standing in darkness, and still choosing to search for even the smallest light. Eventually, she made a decision that changed everything. She left the small place where memories kept her trapped between what hurt and what could never return. She said goodbye to familiar streets and familiar sadness, and she took her fragile courage with her into a world she had never faced before. Fear sat beside her, uncertainty walked behind her, but she kept moving forward anyway, and that quiet, unstoppable decision whispered the truth. She had never allowed herself to believe she was not weak. She was becoming brave. She did not yet know what storms were waiting. She did not know the battles, the tears, the loneliness, and the breaking points ahead of her, but life was about to teach her that she was far stronger than she had ever imagined, and somewhere inside her a warrior was slowly waking, a heart that would learn to rise again and again until bravery would no longer feel like something borrowed, but something that truly belonged to her. And this was only the beginning of the journey that would shape her into the woman she never believed she could be, the woman life was slowly teaching her to become. She arrived in the new city with hope trembling in her chest like a fragile flame fighting against the wind, and for a moment she believed that maybe life would finally become gentle. Yet the city was loud and fast and filled with people chasing dreams with fierce confidence, while she carried only fears and uncertain strength in her tired heart. Every morning, she woke up before the sun stretched across the sky, and she whispered to herself that she would try again today, that she would not let fear decide who she would become, and she walked through busy streets filled with strangers and moving cars, feeling invisible yet surrounded by thousands of lives, each one fighting its own unseen battle. She searched for work with tired determination, stepping into offices with shaking hands and hopeful eyes, only to walk back out with disappointment resting on her shoulders like a heavy blanket, and each rejection whispered the same cruel question, "Are you really enough?" And each time she swallowed her pain and answered softly inside her soul, "Yes, I will try again." Nights were the hardest because silence always tells the truth. She sat alone in a small room with walls that held no memories, and she let the tears fall when the world could not see her. She missed home, she missed safety, she missed the version of herself who believed life might someday be kind. But even through the tears she stayed. She did not run back, she did not give up, and that was strength she never admitted to herself. Loneliness tried to break her. It wrapped around her heart like cold winter wind and whispered that she did not belong here, that this city was too big and she was too small. But something inside her refused to listen, that small piece of courage that had been growing slowly since The day life first shattered her now began to speak louder than fear, and it told her to stand, to breathe, to keep moving forward even when walking felt impossible. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the universe shifted in tiny unseen ways. She found a small job, nothing glamorous, nothing dramatic, but honest work that let her begin again, and she stood behind a counter smiling gently even when exhaustion burned behind her eyes. Because she knew this was not her ending, this was simply a step, and every small step mattered more than she realized. She began to learn the rhythm of this new life, the heartbeat of the city, the softness of sunrise after restless nights, the quiet pride of paying her own way, and the strength that grows when you build yourself from nothing. And even though fear had not disappeared, it no longer controlled her. Instead, it walked beside her as a reminder of everything she had survived. One evening after a long day, she looked at her reflection in a dusty mirror, not searching for beauty, not searching for perfection, but searching for truth, and for the first time, she saw not a weak girl, not a broken heart, not a frightened soul. She saw a fighter, a woman who had every reason to fall yet still found the will to stand, and in that moment something inside her shifted, like a door slowly opening to a room filled with light. She began to understand that bravery is not loud, it does not always roar. Sometimes bravery is quiet and steady. It lives in tired eyes and determined hearts. It lives in the way you wake up after crying all night and still choose to face the day. It lives in the way you hold yourself together when everything inside wants to fall apart, and it lives in the way you refuse to stop believing that your life can still become something beautiful. Yes, she still had wounds, yes, she still had fears, yes, life still felt uncertain, but now she also had proof, living proof carved into every moment of survival, that she was stronger than every storm that had tried to destroy her, and even stronger than the storms that had not yet arrived. This was the chapter where she did not just survive, she began to rebuild, she began to grow, she began to step into the strength she never believed belonged to her, and without even realizing it, she was slowly becoming the brave woman she once thought she could never be. Time kept moving, and with every passing day, she learned a little more about herself. She learned how to stand in uncertainty, she learned how to breathe even when life felt heavy, and she learned how to hold her heart together when doubt tried to tear it apart. And slowly the city that once felt cold and distant began to feel like a place where she could exist, maybe even belong. She met people along the way, some kind, some careless, some who stayed for a while, and some who left too soon. Among them was someone who made her heart believe in warmth again, someone who made her feel seen, not as a survivor, not as a fighter, but simply as a woman who deserved tenderness and love. He listened to her stories, he smiled at her small dreams, he made her laugh on nights where sadness tried to return, and for a moment she allowed herself to hope that maybe life was finally giving something back after taking so much. She trusted slowly, like someone handing fragile glass to the world, afraid it might break again, and she opened her heart piece by piece, because she believed this time things would be different. She believed care meant stability, she believed affection meant safety, she believed she could finally rest her soul in someone else. But life has its own ways of teaching lessons, and sometimes those lessons hurt the most when they come wrapped in love. The day betrayal arrived, it did not come like thunder, it came quietly, like a whisper that steals your breath. He changed, not suddenly, but slowly. His words grew distant, his presence became hollow, his warmth faded into cold space, and one day, without warning, he walked away, leaving behind another broken chapter she never asked for and another wound she did not deserve. She sat alone after he left, feeling like the air around her had disappeared, feeling like the ground beneath her had collapsed, and for a moment she felt like that frightened girl again, the one who lost her father, the one who learned what abandonment tastes like, the one who believed she was never enough. Tears filled her eyes, not loud tears, but the silent kind, the kind that fall like quiet rain while the world keeps moving outside, unaware of the storm happening inside a human soul. Her heart asked painful questions. Why was she not enough? Why did love choose to leave her again? Why did life keep testing her again and again? But there were no answers, only silence, only ache, only the echo of another goodbye. Yet something was different this time. Yes, she was hurting. Yes, she was shattered. Yes, her chest felt like it had been torn open again. But she did not collapse. She did not disappear into darkness like before. Instead, she stood there with heartbreak in her bones and strength in her spirit, and she whispered to herself that she would not break this time because she had already learned how to survive storms like this. Pain tried to control her, but she refused to surrender. She cried, but she did not drown. She trembled, but she did not fall. She allowed herself to feel every ache, every memory, every moment of what once felt beautiful, and then slowly she began to let it go, not because it was easy, but because she had learned that holding pain too tightly only keeps the heart bleeding. Days went by, and the ache softened into quiet sadness, and that sadness slowly became acceptance, and from that acceptance something powerful began to grow. She realized that bravery was not only surviving loss, bravery was choosing to love again even when love had hurt. Bravery was trusting life again even when life had betrayed. Bravery was believing in her own worth even when someone else failed to see it. She looked at herself again one evening, standing in front of a mirror, not searching for beauty, not searching for flaw, but searching for truth, and she saw a woman who had been left before, and still learned to stand, a woman who had been hurt again and again, yet her heart still beat with strength and softness, a woman who had every reason to close herself, but instead chose healing. Her mother once said that bravery is sometimes just surviving, but now she knew bravery was also learning to live fully after surviving. Bravery was refusing to let the world harden your heart. Bravery was staying kind, staying hopeful, staying open even when life tried to turn you cold. So she began again, this time not because she had to, but because she chose to. She chose herself, she chose growth, she chose to keep believing that her story was not finished. She walked through the city with quieter pain, but stronger steps, and with every breath she understood more clearly that she was not fragile. She was resilient, not weak, but deeply powerful, not unfinished, but beautifully becoming. This was the chapter where heartbreak tried to break her again, but instead it shaped her. It carved deeper strength into her soul, and it reminded her that life may try to crush you, but it cannot defeat you if you refuse to surrender. And slowly she stepped forward into the next part of her journey, carrying lessons, strength, and a heart that still believed in light even after standing in darkness again and again. Healing did not arrive suddenly. It came slowly, gently, almost silently, like morning light slipping through a half-opened window and touching the room before anyone fully wakes. She did not even realize she was healing at first. She simply noticed that her breaths felt less heavy, that her mornings felt less painful, and that her footsteps carried a little more steadiness than before. She was still tender, still learning, still rebuilding, but the storm inside her had finally begun to calm. She started walking in the evenings, not to escape anything but to find herself again. She walked through quiet streets, listening to the rhythmic sound of her own steps, like a promise that she was still moving, still living, still trying. She watched people pass by, each carrying their own invisible burdens, and she felt a strange connection to them, a quiet understanding that everyone is fighting something, no matter how still their faces look. At work she smiled more softly, not forced, not hollow, but real, fragile, yes, but real. She was kinder to herself. She allowed mistakes, she allowed rest, she allowed moments of weakness, and instead of calling herself broken, she began to call herself human. And this shift changed something in her soul. She no longer demanded perfection from herself. She demanded truth and honesty and gentleness, and in return, she felt something she had not felt in years: peace. Life was still uncertain, but for the first time she started to trust that uncertainty did not always mean danger. Sometimes it meant possibility, sometimes it meant growth, sometimes it meant she was stepping into chapters she had not yet learned how to dream about. She realized she did not need to have her entire life figured out. She only needed to keep going, keep breathing, keep choosing herself. One evening she sat in a small cafe holding a warm cup of tea, letting the rising steam soften her thoughts, and she noticed a woman nearby crying quietly into her hands the same way Emma once cried, and without thinking she reached out, offering her a napkin. And the woman looked up with eyes full of pain and whispered, "Thank you," and Emma smiled gently because she saw herself in those eyes, and for the first time she understood why she had survived every storm she had survived, so she could become someone who could understand hurt, someone who could hold space for others without judgment, someone who could offer comfort from a place of genuine knowing. And that tiny moment changed her. It showed her that pain was not wasted. Every scar she carried had taught her compassion. Every heartbreak had taught her empathy. Every fall had taught her how to stand not only for herself, but for others. And she began to realize that her journey was shaping her into a woman with a softer heart but a stronger spirit. Her nights grew calmer. She no longer cried herself to sleep. She no longer begged the universe for answers. She no longer feared waking up alone. Instead, she learned how to sit with her loneliness without letting it consume her. She learned how to turn silence into peace. She learned how to speak gently to herself the way she wished others had spoken to her. She learned how to become her own safe place. And slowly a new kind of dream began to form inside her, not a dream of perfect love or perfect success, but a dream of living with purpose, of building a life that felt honest and full of meaning. She imagined helping others who felt lost. She imagined creating something that could heal hearts the way she had learned to heal her own, and that dream glowed inside her like a quiet light guiding her forward. She began writing in a small notebook, scribbling her thoughts, her lessons, her truths. She wrote about pain. She wrote about healing. She wrote about how strength is not loud. She wrote about how bravery is built from broken pieces. And she wrote about how every woman carries storms inside her, but still finds ways to stand tall and live gently. She did not know if anyone would ever read her words, but writing helped her breathe. It helped her understand her own journey, and it helped her transform her wounds into something meaningful. As the weeks passed, she felt herself changing, not into someone new, but into someone real, someone she had always been. Beneath the fear, beneath the shame, beneath the pain, she was becoming a woman who knew her worth, not because someone told her she was worthy, but because she discovered it through surviving and rising and surviving again. One morning, she stood by her window watching sunlight touch the city, and she felt something she had not felt in a long, long time. She felt ready to live fully, ready to begin again, ready to trust life, even with its uncertainties, ready to trust herself even with her imperfections. She knew the world could hurt her again. She knew love could break her again. She knew life could test her again, but she also knew she would rise again no matter what came. She whispered to herself a gentle promise that she would no longer shrink herself to fit into people's expectations, that she would no longer let fear decide her path, that she would no longer apologize for the strength she had fought so hard to build. She promised herself that her life from this moment forward would honor who she had become. This was the chapter where healing bloomed inside her, where she finally saw herself with love and pride, where she stepped out of the shadows of her past and into the light she created herself, and with a steady heart and a brave, quiet soul, she moved forward into the next part of her journey, carrying hope, carrying strength, and carrying the unshakable truth that she was no longer surviving, she was becoming whole. The day came when she finally realized that her story was no longer a story of survival. It had become a story of becoming, a story of growth, a story of strength, written quietly through every tear, every fall, and every rise she had endured. And as she stood in the center of her life, she felt a powerful calm filling her heart, not loud, not dramatic, but deep, steady, and beautifully certain. She woke with a different kind of breath now, a breath that did not shake with fear, but carried gratitude, a breath that did not carry the weight of yesterday, but carried the promise of tomorrow, and she understood something she had never truly believed before, that her life belonged to her, not to the pain that shaped her, not to the people who left her, not to the storms that tried to break her, but to her and her alone. She began to walk with a softness that came from wisdom and a strength that came from resilience. Her steps were no longer hesitant, they were purposeful. Her heart was no longer hiding, it was open. Her mind was no longer trapped in what ifs. It had learned to trust the unfolding of life. She did not need certainty anymore, she only needed faith in her ability to keep moving forward. She started helping others in small, gentle ways, sharing her words, sharing her heart, sharing the quiet truth that no one is truly alone in their battles. She listened to stories of pain, and she offered the comfort she once needed herself, not from a place of pity, but from a place of deep understanding. She knew what it felt like to break, she knew what it felt like to heal, she knew what it felt like to stand again, and so she became a light for those still standing in the dark. Her world did not suddenly become perfect. Storms still existed, challenges still appeared, life still carried edges that could cut, but she no longer feared them because she had learned who she was. She had learned that even when everything falls apart, she does not fall apart forever. She bends, she trembles, she cries, she breaks for a while, but then she rises again, stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. She often remembered the girl she used to be, the girl who believed bravery belonged to others, the girl who felt small, unseen, and fragile, the girl who stood quietly while life felt too big for her, and she smiled softly because she now knew the truth that brave women are not Born brave women are grown by life, shaped by storms, molded by pain, strengthened by struggle, and illuminated by hope. One evening, she stood beneath a wide-open sky, watching the fading light melt into gentle darkness, and she felt a peaceful warmth spreading through her chest. She thought about every chapter that brought her here, every hard moment, every lonely night, every test, every heartbreak, and instead of feeling bitterness, she felt gratitude. She whispered thank you to the life that once broke her, because it was the same life that built her. She was no longer the girl waiting to be rescued. She was the woman who rescued herself. She was no longer searching for someone to give her worth. She carried her worth inside her bones. She was no longer afraid of being alone because she had become her own steady companion, her own comfort, her own strength. And with this powerful truth, she stepped into her future, not needing it to be perfect, not needing it to be certain, only needing it to be real. She would live with courage. She would love with softness. She would continue to rise no matter how many times life tested her in. She would keep reminding herself that bravery is not something you are born with. Bravery is something life teaches you through survival, through healing, through hope, and through refusing to give up. So she walked forward with a heart that had been broken and rebuilt, with hands that had learned how to hold gently, with eyes that had seen darkness and still chose to search for light, and with a soul that finally believed in its own strength. And as she continued her journey, she carried one quiet message within her, for herself and for every soul who ever felt small. You are not weak. You are not alone. You are not unfinished. You are becoming. You are rising. You are brave. Because she was never born brave. Life taught her to be, and she learned beautifully and completely, and she continued onward into a future she was finally ready to embrace.